Well, top of the morning to you. Welcome to our key market drivers call for October 29th. There's our contact info. We would love to hear from you. Happy Halloween a little bit early to everybody. And let's go ahead and dive in here. As we kicked around this morning, what's driving markets? I think there's several things, as there always is, but I think there's an export story here in at least a couple commodities. Corn exports are rolling right along. That's good. That has supported corn prices. We've also got a soybean oil export story. I'm not sure we have a story yet or a developing story. We haven't really exported a lot of soybean oil yet, but there is every reason to believe that we probably will in pretty short order. Now, I think if you look at it statistically, soybean oil export sales crop year to date, which by the way just started 4 weeks ago. Crop year starts for oil on October 1st. The big headline is that oil export sales are up like what, 400 and something percent, 300 and something percent.
Yeah, 432 or something.
It's a little bit. I think doesn't necessarily paint the right picture because at this time last year we had virtually nothing sold.
Right. I think it's in the slide. I think it's like a whole 240 million.
Yeah, but still, it's off to a good start. And I think really more importantly, as we'll show you, when you look at palm oil, when you look at soybean oil prices in South America, U.S. prices are competitive when you look at what's trading here. So I was also told by a couple crusher refiners that the reason you haven't really seen shipments take off yet and sales take off yet is that we've come out of these lower crush rates this summer. There really hasn't been enough stocks build up. So I think there's a soybean oil story. We've got, wait, what? On soybean oil export competitiveness, because honestly, that's something we haven't had to look at for 3 years.
I was going to say years.
Yeah, it's been a long time since we've had to look to the export market. I think when you look at the big drop in bean oil yesterday, I think it goes along with that second bullet that we've got up there. We had about a 6% decline in crude oil prices yesterday.
We gapped open almost $3.
Yeah, gapped open $3, ended the day. I think last I looked at it, we were down a little bit over $4. And the reason for that was just Israel, in their retaliation against Iran, hit military targets and did not hit oil infrastructure. Now, they telegraphed that was going to be their plan last week. So I guess I'm not sure exactly why the market waited until this weekend to react to it when the actual strike occurred. But regardless, we have much lower energy prices, and because of the tie to the renewable diesel and biodiesel margin, energy goes down, bean oil goes down. That is kind of been the path that we've been on. I think when you look at veg oil prices, we have a lot of veg oil customers. I think on the bearish side, soybeans seem to want to go down. Energy prices are going down. On the bullish side, we've got this world export market that, at least for now, is ripping right along. Seems to be plenty of demand with palm oil prices up where they're at. So let's go ahead and get into it. Here's some of the stats you were talking about, Scott. Corn exports, sales and shipments up 34% and 33% respectively. I think that's the best start to the export season in 3 or 4 years. So life is pretty good there. Listen to
and one thing to draw a difference between that and the soybean oil is we're talking about big numbers, right? Mm-hmm. We had big numbers last year for corn, and so it's a little more impressive to see us up a third this year over last year, knowing that we had pretty good exports last year.
Yeah, that is an excellent call out. When you look at those export totals, Bill's at 2.2 billion bushels. USDA is closer to 2.3 billion bushels. Not sure how they got to 2.293. That's an awfully specific number this early in the game. But regardless, those are decent export years, not huge, but decent export years, and we're exceeding that at least for now at a pretty good clip. So where do we go from here? I was listening to AgriTalk. I think I told you guys on the radio coming back from my vacation last week. And they were talking about export numbers, 2.4, 2.5, pushing ending stocks down closer to 1.75, maybe 1.8 billion bushels. That's still plenty of corn, but it certainly doesn't probably indicate that we need a 3 handle. if you got ending stocks numbers above 2 billion bushels, that's where you start talking about these breaks in the market below $4. The low back in end of August, we keep calling out was 384, probably because the export market hadn't really taken flight yet, and we had expectations for larger stockpiles here in the U.S. So, and there's the soybean oil number, the impressive 423% up, but again, I think we had 2 truckloads in a boat in the export market at this time last year. So, at any rate, we'll see. Talking to people around the industry, that USDA 600 million pound forecast for the year, I had a large crusher refiner that should probably remain nameless a couple of weeks ago told me that they would bet the overs on 2x that number. So that might panic some people. If you look at the ending stocks and you take another 600 million bushels off of it, you go, oh my God, we're out of oil. We're not going to be out of oil. We got plenty of beans with oil in them and plenty of crush capacity to extract said oil. So I don't know that it changes my ending stocks forecast. It just maybe increases my ideas of what I think crush might be. So also wanted to call out, we had Russia hosted tell me again what BRICS, Brazil, Russia, India, and China.
Yeah. And there's others that get added into that are kind of trying to glom on. But that's the big ones.
Yeah, and so Russia has kind of suggested maybe a commodity exchange that is not quoted in U.S. dollars. I'm sure Putin would like to have it in rubles. I don't know if that'll really go anywhere. I don't know if that gets any legs or not, but something that we'll kind of keep an eye on for you. Also got a Fed meeting next week. Also heard that maybe we have an election or something too.
Somebody said something.
Somebody said something about an election. So we got a Fed meeting and an election next week. We will keep an eye out for that. And then, of course, we have the November WASDE. I think when it comes to as fast as harvest has been this year, typically you would not expect a huge change October to November, but I guess it is the USDA, right?
It's November. It's typically one of the lower ones.
Yeah, not too big a deal. So what happened last week? Well, one of the things that we wanted to call out is we've been talking about range-bound prices for kind of the grains and oilseeds complex, and none of those ranges were violated last week. Now, I will tell you what, late last week, because of all this world story in veg oil, soybean oil futures took a run at the top of that range. They got almost all the way to the top of that range and then have fallen back pretty precipitously back towards the middle of the range. But I suppose if you're asking me for betting odds right now, the commodity that probably has the best chance to break out the top of the range, even though I don't think that's likely, is bean oil. The ones that's got the best chance to break out the bottom of the range, in my humble opinion, is probably soybeans. We got a lot of soybeans, and as Paige is going to tell you, the weather has turned better down in South America. So I don't know that there's a whole lot to report here that we haven't already talked about. I did want to call this out, though. What's that, Scotty?
Yeah, the leaf hoppers.
Yeah, the leaf hoppers. Yeah, that's exactly where I was going. Just read an article yesterday about, you remember the leaf hopper really beat up this Argentine corn crop last year. In populations, there's apparently an agency in the Argentine government that puts out these live traps and does testing, and the populations are down some 90% from a year ago. So probably already lost some corn acres. The Argentine farmers have probably already opted out in some areas of some corn acres just because of that risk. But at least early indications are that shouldn't be a problem. I say early. We're just planting that crop as we speak. So we will see. So I guess that's probably all to really call out here. Why don't you talk to us about what's going on in the wheat side of things?
Well, wheat, I suppose, would be one, maybe along with corn, that you would bet can't get out of the range or won't get out of the range. Even after yesterday's drop, we were down last week a little bit. We were down a good bit more yesterday. In fact, you may have seen in your email inbox that we got some of our baseline targets met. So you should have seen a coverage alert. And so now we're priced out all the way through Q1. And we're just kind of right back in the middle of the range. There needs to be something else from an input standpoint to push this market either higher or lower. And until that happens, we're going to just kind of sit right here in the middle. Another thing you can see there on international prices, we were down pretty significantly with our hard red winter wheat offerings at the Gulf, down $14 a ton. And Russia and to a lesser degree, maybe Ukraine, were both up. And that's kind of what has to happen to get the United States into the export game. Guess what? We're still not in the export game. So we'll see. Here at home, we're kind of getting to the last lap here on planting. We're maybe just a little bit behind average. The bigger thing to call out, I think, there is winter wheat conditions. Now, 38% good to excellent. We got our first USDA conditions report for this crop year. We'll get a handful of these maybe through the end of November before they
shut her down for the winter.
Yep, they'll shut that down for the winter. That is notable because that's the second worst on record going back to 22. We started out even worse than this year. So it's very dry. It's not really good. Maybe we have some rain on the way, possibly. The last thing I would say, and I say this all the time, while we watch fall conditions and we kind of make a big deal about it, it doesn't mean as much as spring conditions. You obviously have to get the plant up and growing, but once it's up and growing, those conditions don't mean nearly as much as what happens in the spring. Last thing I guess I'll say, just from a world perspective, you see there that SoyEcon raised their estimate for Russia's October exports. That's pretty significant. That's a record. We were just talking about not too many weeks ago about how maybe they would be lowering their total export commitment for the year. I guess it's a smoke them if you got them kind of a situation over there right now. Keep rolling along.
Seems like if Putin needs export business, he just shoots some missiles into Odessa and or some Ukrainian export ships, and voila, everybody buys from him.
Lower the price a little bit.
Yeah.
Australia, I think I have mentioned in the last week or two that it's probably not as good as what Uncle Sam is saying. The ag attaché came out and said 28.5. Now, that's above the 10-year average by almost 2 million tons, but it's certainly not as good as the 32 that USDA has out there. Most of the privates are kind of in the same spot. So there you go.
Yeah. Well, thank you for that. I think when you look at the soy complex, and this kind of goes to, we were up a little bit last week. Soybeans still have that on the board, that 955 low in November beans. And here we are close to first notice day. It was set back in the middle of August. That has so far been the bottom. It's a market that clearly doesn't feel too comfortable over $10, especially now that it's raining in South America. That ought to have a drag on bean oil prices to a point, but soybean, especially with energy coming down. But again, the push and pull of the veg oil markets right now, negative are, again, energy prices are lower, bean prices are lower. On the bullish side, you got this world story that I'll talk a little bit more about, I guess, as I get into the veg oil side of things. But we got the crop is about done. I'm surprised we only did 17% of our beans last week. I'm not exactly sure why that is. But
did you see the pace on corn?
Yeah, they flipped back to corn a little bit. I was down a little bit further south, southern Illinois, down into Kentucky.
There was a map. There was a map that showed. I don't remember if it was Pro Farmer or no. Somebody put out a map. Might have been. And it showed like this kind of a temperature map of the U.S. and soybean harvest percentage, and it looked like almost the entire U.S. was done with soybean harvest except for this little blob over in the east, like parts of North Carolina, Georgia, that area out there. I don't know how many beans that is, but I'm guessing with all the weather they had, maybe that delayed things a bit. But there was kind of a big blob of red that just showed that they weren't very far along with harvest yet. So that we may get to a spot where we kind of stop moving forward just because there's a chunk of the U.S. that either isn't going to harvest some of those beans, or maybe, I don't know how that works, but
Is
that's
that
kind of,
still,
because I was kind of wondering the same thing. I'm like, how come we were rolling along so quick, and then all of a sudden bean harvest here the end of October seemed to kind of stop? But
is that hurricane areas?
yeah, I think so.
Well, and I think there's some of it, though. I think there's also some maturity issues. On my vacation last week, took a drive both directions down through, across Missouri, down through the boot heel of Missouri, across the southern tip of Illinois, and down into Kentucky. And they were going after corn, and there was a lot of beans still in the field.
Yeah,
If I gave you $100 to go find me a soybean field around here that hasn't been harvested, you'd probably be driving around a while.
you gotta
Well, we
look
know.
hard, and there's
Yeah.
still some of that stuff that got flooded out and replanted.
Yeah, I think
Still
they
isn't quite there
the
yet.
further south you get, I think the longer season type variety zones that they're planting. So,
When we drove
yeah,
back,
I think
when we
they-
drove back on Sunday from Omaha, we saw fields that still had those little islands out there. You might have 5 or 10, 15 acres here or there of beans, to your point, Scott, that were drowned out. And Farmer Dave mentioned that he has some of that, and he said it's not even really worth going out and going after it, because he said they're green, they're little, they're not good quality. So maybe you have situations where some of this stuff that was replanted just never did fully mature, and it just won't get harvested.
Yep. I think the other call out I wanted to do here is South America. Paige's going to talk about the weather. I won't steal her thunder, except to tell you that it's finally raining everywhere we need it to rain down there. And farmers are planting quickly. You see the bottom bullet on the bare side. Mato Grosso farmers planted almost a third of their intended soybean acres last week. Mato Grosso is up to, I think, 89 or about 56% planted, only 5 or 6 percentage points behind the 5-year average. I suspect that they will surpass the 5-year average when we get the data next week. So,
What problem?
you said all along, talk to me on November 1st, right?
Right.
Well,
No
that's
problem.
maybe the case. Yeah, we got over a third of the Brazilian crop in total. And that's still behind the 5-year average, but we are again gaining ground quickly, and wouldn't surprise me nationally down there if we catch up to that 5-year average or get awfully close to it next week. So I guess we've seen that movie before. That's kind of been your story for the last month, hasn't it?
Yep.
Talk to me on November 1st. Probably good advice going forward when we start talking about that. Here is your U.S. soybean oil prices. Now, this gives you a couple years worth of history, but we've spent a good bit of time here of late. And you can see if I took this back a little farther, we have been way above the world veg oil markets for really almost 3 years out of the U.S. We haven't really had to look at the world export markets or world prices or palm oil prices or anything else, because honestly, it didn't matter. We have ranged between 6 and 12, 15 cents a pound above the rest of the world for quite a while. Well, that's not the case anymore. You see this little red line? That's us. We got Argentina going up, and we actually got another little dot or two over here. We're actually cheaper than Argentine bean oil. That don't happen very often out of the U.S. So I do believe that we will see exports, and that's probably going to support prices here. Here's your Mato Grosso planting map. Again, this is in Portuguese, but you kind of get the idea. The red line is the "You Are Here" line this year, and you can see that we're certainly in the range. We're just about back to the 5-year average. And we seem to be putting this crop in the ground lickety split down there. So we'll have to wait for the next batch of dryness to get bullish again. And then world veg oil prices. So you probably saw the NOPA crush report. I think you guys might have talked about it on the call last week. We got U.S. stocks levels at kind of some of the lowest points in the last 10 years. So the question before the House is, well, is that a problem or is that not a problem? I don't think it's a problem for a couple reasons. First off, it's always the lowest at the end of the crop year. That's the end of September. Here we are out into October. Crush is ramping up, and we will build stocks. We virtually always build stocks between the end of September and the end of March. I say virtually always, probably always. So we should start building stocks. That's point number one. The trajectory is going to go back the other direction. The other thing is this whole notion of, so how much soybean oil as a feedstock for renewable fuel is sitting in some of the tanks of these gigantic renewable diesel plants. there is a bit of a move afoot, and I'm not sure if it's headed up by Bill Lapp at Advanced Economic Solutions, but probably he's certainly one of the ones pushing it, of trying to convince the USDA and the government that, we probably ought to be counting some of those stocks. Because, it's probably costing us market volatility as the market looks at these stocks and goes, oh my God, that's a low number. Well, you got about 6 billion pounds of annual usage of soybean oils going into renewable diesel right now. And those guys got gigantic plants and gigantic tanks. Is that skewing the picture? I continue to believe that it probably is. So with that, I'm probably getting a little bit windy here. Let's talk about dairy. Jay, what's going on in the dairy market?
Yeah, let's talk about the dairy complex. I'm going to build off the theme of the week about exports once we get to cheese, but let's go back to the milk production report last week. So milk production report last week was good. I think the biggest call out was for the month of September. I think we've kind of bottomed out in declines in milk production. Slowly but surely we're going to kind of inch our way forward going into 2025. Talk a little bit more about that. USDA went back and revised the August number. The August number on milk production was negative, and now it's positive.
Really?
So that's interesting in of itself. Now, I think the risk going forward on milk production is what we've got going on in California right now with the bird flu impacting cows, which we've talked about before. So again, that's not captured in the September report. That'll more than likely get caught in the October report. So more to come on that. But again, I think overall, barring the bird flu outbreak and the impact on dairy production in California and other areas, I think maybe, knock on wood, we've kind of, bottomed out or beginning to bottom out on milk production being lower year over year. So if we start to see that milk production number tick up going into 2025. On the cheese side, as I mentioned on exports, right now, if you go back last spring, we had a pretty wide spread on the U.S. market versus international market, and we picked up a whole bunch of exports. The August numbers were pretty good on the cheese side, and they've kind of continued through. We thought most of that stuff would kind of shut off during the summertime. It didn't really do that. It did slow down a little bit, but the numbers have been solid at keeping the cheese market up. Now, current cheese prices are not at the same wide spreads they were in the spring. Back in the spring, it's 40, 50 cents per pound. We are still a discount right now to the international market, but just not as wide. So we'll see how that plays out. On the butter side, cream readily available. We've got more butter stocks year over year. Sales have kind of slowed down a little bit on the butter side. So we've seen prices reflect that. But net overall in the dairy complex, things are looking pretty good as we kind of work our way into 2025 going forward.
Yeah, hopefully this butter market is going to congratulate you for finally getting that brush fire put out. I mean, I getting a little tired of looking at butter prices. It started with a 3, but we're finally back down to, I guess, what is still historically pretty high levels prices.
Yeah.
But certainly better than we've lived through here, or a big chunk of this past summer. So
yeah,
all right.
I would agree with you. I would term the butter prices more reasonable than what they have been here in the past.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you for that, Jay. And I am going to, for the first time in quite a while, generally skip past spec positions because honestly, not much going on at the commodity casino for the first time in quite a few months.
Is it open?
I think it's still open, but I think it's just the nickel slots is all that's really been played right now. So, anyway, what can you tell us about the weather, Paige?
Yeah, parts of the U.S. actually got some rain the past week. Looks like here in outside of Omaha, we have some more rain chances this week. And this past 7-day precipitation map, you can see wheat country got a little bit.
A little
but
bit of
it's
color
really,
in Kansas.
Mm-hmm. It's when you look at kind of the longer term forecast, it looks like there might even be some more rain expected across those areas. Normally when we talk about rain when it comes to harvest, that's not exactly a good thing, but as Dave mentioned before, harvest is still rolling well ahead of average pace, and we are so dang dry around here, and pretty much all of the Midwest is extremely dry, that we'll kind of take whatever rain we can get at this
Yeah,
point.
if you got 2 inches of rain right here, I'm not sure any of it would run off. It would just go right in the ground and you'd be right back out in the fields in a day.
Soak it all
Yep.
up.
We were
Yep.
at corn maze with the grandkids here this past weekend, and there was a crack out in that cornfield in the maze that I just was about to make sure that the 3-year-old didn't fall in it. So it's dry.
Yeah, it is very dry out here. If you want to move forward to the forecast, the 7-day forecast you can see has a pretty good swath of rain kind of going through the Midwest. Hits some parts of wheat country, which is beneficial, but that corn area and drought map is paints kind of the picture that I've been saying. We are dry. Pretty much everywhere in the Corn Belt seems to be dry. And probably too early to be overly concerned about spring planting at this point. But it seems like we're kind of being set up to need a lot of precipitation this winter and into next spring to kind of replenish a lot of this soil moisture. So as much as I don't want to say it, hopefully we get a lot of snow this winter. And we see this situation kind of get a little bit better. If you pop forward to the longer term forecast, it seems like temperatures are still staying warm around here. But again, those precipitation maps are really what we're looking at here. Both of those have some pretty good rain chances going across wheat country, which is
Dark
definitely
green for the
helpful.
hard red winter wheat, guys. That's good.
Yeah.
Needed.
One other thing that I wanted to point out when it comes to U.S. weather and just how quick harvest is going. A lot of farmers are already done at this point, which seems pretty early. And I've seen a lot of field work going on around here. I've seen quite a few fields that have already been disked. There's a lot of farmers, honestly, kind of cleaning up tree lines and really cleaning up their fields. So if we have good soil moisture when it comes next spring, I don't think we're going to have to really wait on a whole lot of field work to be done because a lot of that is getting done this fall. So
One thing that's not being done right now is fall fertilizer. It's so
I've seen a little
dry
bit.
and that not very much anhydrous going down right now.
Just because it's so dry, you lose it.
Yep. Yep. So that's something that does make a little bit of difference. There's
So if
not.
we get some of this moisture, though, we have, I think you're saying you think we'll get better fertilizer application.
I think so. I think so.
Yeah, we could certainly use it. How about South America?
Yeah, Dave stole a little bit of my thunder, but the maps really paint the better picture. South American
Yep.
weather has kind of turned on and stayed on here. These are some good widespread rains across Brazil. You can see some even pretty heavy rains and down into Argentina. So things are looking a lot better down there. And if you pop forward to the longer term forecast, it looks like it's going to stay that way. Maybe a little bit less rain in the 7-day, but I don't think anyone's complaining about that forecast. And the 14-day looks dang near ideal. Super widespread rains across Brazil and those northern planting areas in Argentina. So knock on wood, it looks like the rainy season has officially fully kicked off and looks to be sticking around. So
I read a
to
wire.
Dave's earlier point, what problem? We kind of got farmers feeling a lot better down there to get planted, and seems like they got planted in a hurry. So
Yeah, we got a lot of growing season still in front of us, but at least the early dryness worry is kind of in the rear view. Read a good wire last week, and it was basically making the point that in less than 2 weeks, we have gone from the edge of hitting the panic button to kind of looking like a garden spot down there. So hopefully this continues. Well, that's what we've got for you this week, folks. As always, we would love to hear your feedback of how we can make this a better, more productive call for you. And as always, be careful out there.